Hey everyone, George here with Wine Industry Network. Welcome to another episode of the Win Insider Series. And for those of you that may be tuning in to one of these for the first time, it's a chance where we get to talk to different people in the industry, different roles, different perspectives. Sometimes they're folks that I've known or worked with, and so it's a chance for me to catch up with them a little bit. And then selfishly, sometimes it's a chance for me to get to know some people that I haven't had the chance to meet, and that's the case today. We've got Dominic Engels. Dom, you like to go by Dom, right?
Call me Dom. Yep.
Oh, you Dom, CEO, Bronco Wine Company, one of the largest wine companies in the country. And Dom's new to the role, just started in November. So Dom, thanks for joining us today.
George, thank you for having me. Yep. It's a very interesting time to join the wine business. Lots of change and lots of excitement.
Well, it's funny because that's like I literally want to get into that with you because you've got such a cool background, and you picked a kind of interesting time to jump into the wine game. So we're going to get into that, but I'm really curious about your background because it's not really the most traditional route. Like typically, you wind up being the CEO of a big, influential wine company like Bronco. Usually you kind of work your way up through the wine industry ladder, right? So, but that's not you. You did not do that, man.
No, I have a different path. Some of the strong themes in my past, though, really position me humbly well to tackle the job at hand at Bronco. One of them is I have been in the beverage alcohol space before. I had a front row seat for when the wonderful company acquired Justin Wine
Yeah.
back in 2010, and then added on Landmark Winery. I wasn't responsible for those businesses at the wonderful company, but I also worked directly for Stuart Resnick, and so was very much exposed to those acquisitions. That was my first kind of wine business exposure, and then ran Stone Brewing, including Stone Distribution and all the hospitality outlets. And for 4 years in San Diego, and that gave me a lot of great beverage alcohol experience as CEO there. And but the couple of the other themes that are very important for the position at Bronco, one is that it's a family-owned business, and so I have a lot of family ownership experience and founder-led transitional experience in my past, where I've been the first CEO that's not founder, or I've worked directly for a family, and so that's very helpful in the Bronco situation, and very relevant to other wineries, of course, that are going through generational change. It's happening all over the place in California.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to get into that with you because that can be a tricky, a bit of a tricky dance sometimes when you step into a role like that. So I can appreciate that. But yeah, I want to go back. So talk a little bit about because I think the things that you've done are really quite interesting. So the wonderful company, you were there for pretty
Goodly
decent.
amount of time, 11 and a half years. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked directly for Stuart for all of those years, and sometimes for his wife Linda as well. Really amazing time. I helped build the wonderful pistachio brand that's now a
Yeah.
multi-billion-dollar brand. We started that from scratch. I did the first sales call the Safeway. I'll never forget it, way back when, and that's turned into a monster. A lot of great experience. I ran Europe and the Middle East for the company. Um, we had a little distribution company at Palm. My last position there, I ran Palm Wonderful, the fresh and juice business. So lots of great experiences connecting to agriculture, and then all the way through to creating value added activities, and then selling brands at retail, both domestically and all over the world.
So when you were working in like the Middle East and Europe, did you live
Yeah.
overseas?
Yeah. I took my family. We lived for 4 years in Brussels, in Belgium, and it was amazing. It's
Oh,
great.
what an awesome experience. How old you have kids?
Yeah, I have three boys. At the time when we moved there, they were 2, 6, and 8, and then we lived there for 4 years. So my youngest, for a while, had lived, more of his kind of cognizant life as a Belgian than as an American, which was crazy. But they uniformly all think that was like the best adventure they ever had, and so grateful for it, which is awesome.
That's literally what I was thinking. I was thinking, what a cool family adventure, right? So like,
Yep.
okay, let's go. Dad's got a new job or dad's got a new
Yep.
position and off you go.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it
Now,
was fun. It was like 4 years. It was sort of like 4 years of high school or something. Your freshman year, you don't know where your classes are, and you're learning everything's brand new. And by your senior year, you don't want to you don't want to graduate.
yeah. Was it weird when you came back and was it hard? Was that a hard transition for the kids?
Yeah, it was a little bit. I mean, more for the kids. Their their clothes were different, and my youngest would refer to the backyard as the garden, or
Yeah.
we just had, they're just funny little things. But we had such a good friend group. Moved back to the same community we left, and so we always were intentional about maintaining those relationships, and that helped a ton.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was a great experience and one where we were able to reassimilate pretty well, which was nice.
So then you go from there to Stone Brewing, right? Is that what's the next
That's
step?
right. Yep. Yep. Go there to Stone Brewing, and Steve Wagner, Greg Cook started that company and had been running it for about 16 years when I took over. And it was really a cool brand because I call it the kind of Harley Davidson of craft beer. It was really, folks have tattoos of
You're not
guardrails,
worthy, right? Like just like
very aggressive, and then on top of that, they had started their own distribution company. So we had 100, ultimately, we had 100 trucks driving around Southern California, 5.5 million cases, supplier brands plus our own brands. And so it was brewing, it was distribution. We had two of the largest restaurants in San Diego County, both over 70,000 square feet. I mean, big restaurants. We had an operation in Germany. We had just opened a brewery in Richmond, Virginia, and then while I was there, we stood up a restaurant business in China. So it was really quite an adventure. I really treasured those 4 years. Gave me a lot of great experience.
that had to be a lot of fun too, right? Because it's just the whole like irreverent attitude of the
Yeah.
craft beer movement, like so. Yeah, I've been in the wine industry for a long time, and every year, you go off to. We put on a trade show here in Santa Rosa too, but you go off to Unified or different wine industry trade shows. But for a while there, we were also looking at. We work a lot with vendors, right? So a lot of the vendors that service the wine industry service the craft, the beer industry.
Yep.
And, I remember the first time I went to the craft brewers conference, right?
Yeah.
CBC. I was like, what in the world? This is not.
Super fun.
I'm not in a wine. This is not a wine industry event, man. This is
I would tell you this. I remember my first day or two on the job at Stone. They're like, "Oh yeah, we got to taste the new beers." And I, as a CEO, I was like at the table, new beer tasting, and my opinions mattered from day one to these brewers.
yeah,
And I really feel like I built a lot of confidence, a lot of expertise through all those tastings over 4 years, of course, and all the products we developed. And we developed a lot of new products at Stone.
yeah,
But I've reflected since joining wine. I was like, if I had started in the wine, I don't have all the lingo and it's a little fancier and a little more snooty and all these things. And
yeah.
beer is much more welcoming and much more casual. And so it was a nice sequence to start with beer and then evolve to wine.
Yeah, no, I loved it, man. I went. I think I was like, I went to DC, Denver, and I think Portland. So I went to three of those
Cool.
conferences, and I was like, oh, and it was so cool. And this is when things were really booming, right? So the brewers would show up with like their entire cellar staff,
Yeah.
and for the production team. And the parties were Lagunitas was renting out bars or two bars at a time, and there was circus things going on. And
It's very intense. I mean, when we did CBC, obviously, and you are booked from dawn to dusk for 5 or 6 days, plus all the judging that's going on. So all your brewers are there to judge beers, and you're trying to win medals, and you're debuting all these new innovations. It's really fun.
were you into beer before you got the job? You had to be into beer a little bit, right? And before you got that job.
Very, I had a very fundamental craft beer intervention. I was lucky to have one very early in my life. When I went to school in New Hampshire, and in the
Okay.
next state over, there was a brewery called Catamount, and they had a beer called Catamount Amber Ale. And one of my close friends, Mike Litter, had a part-time job there, and he'd bring like the half-fill bottles. When you're running the line that you're
Yeah,
ramping up, they get all the partial fills. So as a college student, we're glad to collect any beer we can possibly get, even if it's a
yeah,
half-filled bottle. It's better than an empty bottle. And so I was like, what is this stuff? And compared to Natty Light or Milwaukee's Best or, Keystone Ice or whatever we were drinking at the time, I was like, I much prefer this. And then I mentioned Belgium. That
yeah,
was like the most amazing tacit education, all the Trappist styles. I was going to West Fletiron, pull into the monastery there. You open your trunk, you don't even get out of your car. They drop 2 cases of West Fletiron in your trunk. I mean, I learned so much. So by the time I got to Stone, I was very, very tuned in to the beer thing.
yeah. The Belgians definitely helped give you some street credibility, right? So that's pretty
100%.
cool.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. Actually, I could talk a lot about this, but I also, German was my major in college, and I studied in Berlin and spent a lot of time in Czech Republic and Germany. And, they're very narrow in their styles there. In Belgium, they are crazy. All the wild fermentation and all the fruited beers and all that. So there's really interesting ways to compare and contrast Belgian beers with, some of the other, Northern European countries. Pretty interesting.
Well, I think I love that, and we'll get to this, but I wish a little bit more of that to creep into our wine world, right? Because that freedom, that approachability, I mean, it's
It's
something we can
created
still,
an issue. I think you know, that doesn't exist. I think there's a little of an intimidation factor. I
yeah,
say this a lot, and you and I are probably the same vintage here that we
yeah,
remember like the Cadillac that was not your father's Cadillac, that whole
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
The wine business has to do that, right? They have to create products that are relevant, that are, maybe not in 750 milliliter bottles or somehow associated with older generations, right? And in order to give permission to younger folks to participate in wine. And I think the industry has not done a good job of recruitment, innovation, responsiveness, especially at that value end, right? Where folks are going to try, right? And
I completely agree with you, man. I say it all the time. I know it's like not the most popular. Sometimes I'm just complaining about like we're our own worst thing, but we're gonna get to that because I don't want to skip Revolution Foods because that was something I think was super admirable and must have been that had to be a feel good position. So talk a little bit about that, and
yeah.
then we're gonna fix the wine industry.
So part of the logic, again, taking over for a founder-led business there. Um, she'd been leading the business for probably similar to Steve and Greg, like 15 or 16 years. The company had never made money,
Yeah,
and yet had this very noble purpose of feeding fresh meals to kids. And I led the company through the transition from founder to professional CEO, from losses to extreme profitability.
yeah.
And for me, the profitability was a direct way to measure that we'd created a sustainable way to do things differently for, 150 plus thousand kids in California, eating better meals. And so we have,
Tell people about what Revolution Foods is all about. I don't want to like skip over that because I when I was reading about that, I was like, this is amazing. So tell just
we have a real challenge in this country where, between our dietary guidelines and the school lunch program, the national school lunch program, which is part of the Farm Bill, um, and is administered by the USDA. And so they underwrite, school meals for kids that need them. And California during COVID went to universal meals, which is great. So there was this sort of humiliating exercise that kids that in need had to do, which was get into a separate line and fill out an application. And it's just all this kind of dignity issues. California got ahead on that and said, you don't have to prove need. Anybody that wants a meal can get a meal. Revolution Foods came along as, hey, the quality of these meals, historically, I mean, it's kind of comical, right? You say school meal, and immediately you and I think about, some Salisbury steak tacked to a wall or some nasty.
try a piece of pizza or something. Yeah.
Right, right. And so Revolution Foods was founded on the idea that we can feed healthier food to kids that kids want to eat, by the way. So not like Brussels sprouts and broccoli and like, all your vegetables, that's not going to get consumed. And the way the National School Lunch Program works actually is the school only gets reimbursed for the meal when the kid eats it, right? Not that what you're serving. And so it's very
Okay.
important that the kid actually has to consume the meal. And so you don't want waste, and you want things that are good. And so Revolution Foods was built on, we can do this better. And the way we did it was through a distribution. We had DSD trucks, 150 trucks in California delivering meals daily to schools. So they were fresh and really differentiated from a quality standpoint from your typical, cafeteria might provide. And like
Yeah.
I say, we're serving breakfast, lunch, supper, all kinds of meals to different schools across California. And originally, it had been a national mandate. And so part of what I did was say, let's focus on California. There's a lot to be done here in California.
Yeah.
I think the school food business in California is a $6 billion, industry. It's a big deal. And
Yes.
so there's a lot of opportunity here to do things in a progressive state.
Well, when I was reading about that, I was thinking, God, that must have been like, because obviously as a business person, you want to make money, right? You want to be profitable, you want to grow, et cetera. And that feels great. But on top of that, like it must just been such a feel good position, right? To know that you're actually making a difference kids' lives.
Yeah, no, and I think what was more even moreover than that, George, was that um, I helped build a company that could sustain itself on a free cash flow basis. And that's better than a charity, right? Charity requires donations, but if you can
Yeah.
actually do something in a private enterprise where you can do the kind of things we were doing, we're a public benefit corp and a B corp for over a decade. And we were doing it, we were doing good and making money. Like that's the best thing. And so that was kind of the challenge I started with was like, I love the mission, but in order to make it a perpetual enterprise, it has to be able to be profitable enough to reinvest in itself and continue. And that's what we accomplished.
So I didn't really know what B Corp meant until I was like, so I had a little research. So tell people what B Corp is, because that's another cool thing that you accomplished.
Yeah, so it's it's a commitment to make decisions and consider your employees, your communities, your customers, all your stakeholders, the environment in the decisions that you make as a business. And so you're incurring, some extra cost, but a lot of extra kind of measurement and management to ensure that, like I say, all these decisions that you're making and the enterprise you're creating, it's good for the earth, it's good
Yeah.
for the community. It's good for your people. It's good for your customers. It's really a way to think about, sort of a 360 view of your business. So it's not just about making money.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me like regenerative farming,
Yeah,
certification. Like it's
yeah,
like all
similar
those
to that.
different things. So okay, so next Bronco Wine Company, right? So
Yeah,
you decide to like now you're going to jump to the wine business at a very difficult time.
yeah.
Why then?
Well, a couple things. One is, like I say, I'm familiar with distribution companies, hard asset companies, family-run companies, companies going through dramatic transition are all, strong themes through all the experiences we've been discussing here.
Yeah.
Um, but I'll also tell you, like, um, my personal inclination is when I see something that's hard and complex is to run toward it, not run away from it. And I
You're
think
a fight
that's
guy. You're not a flight guy. You're a fight
yeah,
guy.
yeah, no, I mean, if the building's burning, I'm running into it. I'm not running away from it. And I'm not going to say it was a burning building per se, but the industry, it's not really a welcoming place right now. There's a lot that needs to occur in order for it to kind of gain a better equilibrium than it's in right now. It's in deficit right now, of course. So, but that's fascinating to me. I'd rather work in that kind of a construct any day over, drive a big category, no change, kind of rolling along, nothing eventful, nothing strategic, nothing innovative really happening. That's not appealing to me. That may be, and that's not judging it. There are many people that they thrive on that kind of stuff. Great, let them do that. But this is kind of my cup of tea.
Well, no, it's like it's the perfect, and if you're a change agent, right? And if you want to
Yeah,
come here and make a difference, this is the time, right? So because
absolutely.
and again, we're going to get into this, Blake, but now is the time for like toss out the old playbook, right? That playbook is no good anymore, right? We need a new plan. It's the second half. We're getting killed. We got to switch things up a little
We
bit.
got to be dynamic. Yeah, we can't run the same plays and just keep banging into the same walls. No, I mean I have a button and a symbol I start a lot of meetings with, which is we have always done it this way in a circle with a line through it,
I
and
say
you
it
got to
all.
question this stuff.
I say it all the time about it. It's just like, okay, why are you doing this? And don't tell me it's because we've always done it, right? We're not. You can't tell me that. That's like
Yeah.
no bueno.
Yeah.
Um, so you talked a little bit about in your past, like coming in and working for founders. In this situation, right? You're coming in after legendary Fred Franzia and everything he has accomplished for the industry, and then Daniel Leonard was also a long term family-ish thing. How do you how do you kind of go through that dance? I mean, because you come in, you've had employees that have probably been there for 25, 30 years. I mean, they're used to doing things a certain way, right? So family members, what's your approach as the new CEO, right? Because you kind of don't want to disrupt too much, but you got to disrupt something at some point.
Yep. I think you first of all for the family, we're moving at a much faster pace than certainly the post Fred couple of years where Dan was here in sort of an interim capacity, but the business wasn't moving. The business wasn't responding to the environment around itself. It was sort of kind of, I'm not going to say willfully, but kind of ignoring, what was going on and kind of trying to kind of behave like the Fred era, let's say, which was
Yeah.
very successful for the company, right? But Fred's one of a kind,
Yeah.
one of a kind. And when he passed, his approach to business really kind of passed with him. And because no one could kind of pick up and do it the way Fred did it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's been a process of amazing change for the family and for the operating company and the culture of the company. Because for me, we have to kind of unwire or undo a lot of the cultural elements of the way Fred did it. And I say that with complete respect. It's just
Yeah.
it's got to be run differently because Fred was one of a kind. And, I want to build a lasting institution like we talked about with Revolution Foods or Stone or wherever, where, it's more of a executive leadership team and a good hierarchy and more empowerment farther down in the organization. With Fred called all the shots,
Right.
and
Right.
he had a very tight grip on the company.
Yeah.
I don't run that way. I run with delegate responsibility as deep as it can go in the organization, empower the people, inspire the people to do the right things on behalf of the business. And that's just a totally different methodology. Now that's an enduring methodology, by the way. So we're in G3-ish of the Franzia family at this point. So the kids of Fred and Joseph and John have all started to have kids, so that's G3. But
Yeah.
we hope it's going to be G25 sometime, in terms of family owning the business. But we're really oriented around professional operating for the business, and so that's what I represent. Is really we've created a family office and a way for the family to conduct business, steward the land holdings, but my job is to run the operating company, Bronco
Mhm.
Wine, Classic Wines of California, Bivio, all of the pieces, and really make that a professional institution. And there's a lot of change that has to go along with that.
So what I'm curious, so from like just a leadership perspective, right? So you start in November, then you bump right into the holidays. Then, New Year, you're at the tail end of OND, right? So you're kind of things are just sort of they're wrapping up, if you will, for the year. Do you spend like the first couple months? Is it just like meeting people? And I mean, you're trying to get up to speed on an aircraft carrier, like running an aircraft. It doesn't turn quickly. Is that what you do at the beginning? You just meet with everybody and try to learn as fast as you can of what everybody's doing, and like, how do
I
you?
mean, there is a, an intake period, I would call it, where you are, or a listening tour, right? You're trying to gain a lay of the land. Now, I did some of that before I signed on with the company,
Yeah,
of course, but I think the things that we had in front of us require pretty swift action too. And just based on the way the industry was going, based on the way the company was going, we had to make some pretty quick decisions. So um, I did not have a kind of a lazy second half of December. We were cranking as an executive leadership team, and we turned the corner into January, February, and we've been busting our hump over here. We've made a lot of change,
yeah,
a lot of activity, all very positive, and really, really exciting stuff. I think, what you end up reading in the news is, yes, we've gone through some reductions in force, which are unfortunate, but we are certainly far from alone in that category in the wine business. It's all going through some contraction.
yeah.
So, and we're missing those folks, and we don't take those decisions very lightly. But at the same time, we've had to move quickly because we need to be in an athletic stance. We need to be positioned in a way where we can respond to the marketplace with great leadership, and that's what we're doing. And so now, 7 months in ish, we've made a lot of moves in a short amount of time, and thank goodness, because you got crazy stuff happening like RNDC in California. You got wild stuff happening in the business, and you need to be ready for that as an operator in the wine business today. You can't ignore what's going on.
Well, and I mean, when you're, looking at the scale of that you guys are operating, it's tough to be nimble,
It
right?
is. I mean,
It's tough to
especially
be nimble.
especially if you kind of had you've been kind of sleeping for a couple years, since Fred left, and you've been kind of just kind of ignoring the fact that Rome's burning and you're kind of just like, well, this is what Fred would have done, and you kind of
Yeah.
moving along. And I don't, I say that with complete respect, but it had to change. It has, we're missing the genius, right? So
Yeah.
things had to change.
I was sort of going like, is there going to be a Charles Shaw 2.0? Because we know there's a ton of bulk wine out there. Because that was a great thing actually for the industry, right? When kind of cleaned up all the great bulk wine that was just sitting in people's tanks. It needed to go. Put it in a packaged it up at a price point that you couldn't say no to. You got a lot of people buying wine, drinking wine that were like, well, how am I going to say no to this? This is the greatest deal in the world. And then some of those people kept drinking wine, as that deal went away. That was a great thing for the industry. But this is kind of get back to, we started on this before, and before I made us go back to your previous positions. You have to change. And I know for us, so with Wine Industry Network, we make a lot of our money, helping industry vendors. So bottle, barrel, cork, tank guys, between
Yep.
our trade shows and our marketing and things of that nature. And we started to really feel it. I'd say like maybe like 16 months ago, where all of a sudden we put on a big trade show here in Santa Rosa. And all of a sudden, the guys that were taking 4 booths were taking 2 booths, and the guys that were taking 2 booths were taking 1 booth, and the guys were doing $10,000 sponsors were doing $2,500 sponsorships, and I'm thinking, what the hell is going on? And I feel like I went through these stages of like, the first stage was like denial, like, okay, everything's fine. It's an election year. Everything's going to calm down. It doesn't matter who gets, everything's going to be fine. And that didn't have, nothing changed, right? It would just stay the same. And then I was like, I kind of went through like a period of like depression, and I'm like, okay, this is what, now what? Now this is how we work so hard all these years, and it's the sky is falling, right? So I'm dramatic. And but then I got to like, I guess it's probably like around as not so long ago, it was like even like January of this year, where I go, you know what? Acceptance. Like the world has changed, our industry has changed. We need to change. And that's sort of been, everything that we do. We just finished a sales and marketing conference, and like that was sort of like the underlying theme was like change or go away. I mean,
Yeah.
you got to be willing to do things different. And I made a comment because we had a room full of like marketing people, and I said, it's interesting because we don't really have a product problem, right? Our product's pretty good. But from the other levers that, the marketing folks can pull, we have to be looking. You started to talk about this. We have to look at our pricing. We have to look at our packaging. We have to look at what we're saying about ourselves and what we're saying and where we're saying it. And it's got to be different. And that's why I love that you are in this role with such a different type, sort of a non-traditional background, because I think you bring like a fresh perspective. And I love the fact that Stone Brewing experience, because I think that's more the attitude. We need to somehow figure out as an industry how to kind of embrace that and be more welcoming. And, I think about people coming to visit. Well, I'm up in Sonoma County, and certainly, Sonoma, Napa. It's like, we talk, and I know some of my friends don't like when I say this, but like we talk about like that we're not doing a good job connecting with, the next wave of consumers. I call them like 30 something, because the 20-year-old folks, they're not really, we need those 30 folks to start coming on board. But they come to wine country, it's like you got to be like a billionaire to come here, right? You want to go taste wine, it's $100, $50 per person just for a tasting experience. What's left over to buy wine? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's like
Yeah. Plus, you got to make a reservation. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's like
it's
we're
just
not.
more walls, right? More walls between consumers, potential consumers, and our category. I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, it's almost to a detriment. We have 11,400-ish wineries in the US, and there really isn't a concentrated industry voice, that's promoting consumption of wine as just a good social thing to do.
Right,
And so things have been done to the wine industry because of the fact that it's been passive. It's allowed things to happen to it. It's allowed itself to get looped in with all other alcohol. It's
right.
allowed itself to be outmarketed by hard seltzers and whatever else, the twisted teas and the happy dads and whatever. I mean, all these other fun, more seductive things to get your buzz from.
Yeah.
And we've been relatively quiet and highly diluted, because of that diversity of wineries. And now here we are. And then, on top of that, the industry's been very seduced by trading people up. to the point, like you say, that they're $100 wine tastings and $50 wine tastings, things like that. But we've forgotten that the only way you have a perpetual user base is if you keep refilling the beginning of the funnel, which is value. And that's where part of the reason why I joined Bronco is we have to create compelling value opportunities for new users, new
Yep.
consumers of age, of course, that are compelling because you're right, the liquid is good,
Yeah.
but getting folks to be habitual and create more trial around the liquid, that's hard. And
Yeah.
we haven't done a good job of that.
What's funny is just because you said something that reminds me. I guess I say a lot of things. I keep saying I say this a lot. I said, but
Hmm.
I said the other day, like, can we just like make wine fun? Can we make wine fun again? Like, why do we have to be so serious all the time? I mean, it's
Yep.
like that's a
Well,
term.
that's back to that, not your father's wine or not your mother's wine or whatever you want to say, but there's a generational change. It's happening in winery ownership too, for goodness sakes. I mean, it's happening all over the place, but generations change. They don't want to do what the last generation did.
Right.
How do you kind of move with that, embrace that, understand that, and maintain relevance?
But I agree with that. It's so funny. You talk to some of the core consumers been supporting the industry for years and years and years, right? So, pick somebody in their late 60s and yeah, I've had so many of these conversations say like, how did you get into wine? Did you grow up with wine? Like, no, I didn't grow up with wine, but I was going to school in the Bay Area and on the weekends we'd bomb up to Napa or we bomb up to Sonoma County and we go wine tasting and we didn't have any money, but we buy a bottle, we mostly just tasted for free all day, but maybe buy a bottle or two. But then fast forward a few years, 5 years, 10 years, those were the core consumers that supported our industry growth. They were our wine club members. They were, they had their wine cellars, and we're not doing that. To your point, we're not doing that today. We're
Are
still,
we capable of doing it? Absolutely, but we're not doing it.
yeah,
I mean, we have the capability to create experiences, and experiences are probably more valuable today in this digital age than they ever have been, right?
yeah,
I mean, and so we have to figure out how to marshal our inherent resources and maintain relevance. But you're right, there was a watershed time there where that was such a cool thing to do, and there were no barriers, and it was
yeah.
easy, and now we've put up walls.
Well, it's funny. I was at a meeting with it was in like a winery association group of executive directors. And part of the agenda was to talk about what we could be doing, what else could we be doing to better connect with the next wave of consumer. And I'm 59, and I think I was like the youngest guy in the room, and I said, here's an idea. Why don't we get some 30-year-old people as part of this conversation? And you said something that made me think about that. We're having, we're starting to transition winery leadership too. And I think that when
100%.
we look back at this time, and I do think, we're going to, we'll emerge out the other end of it. I think we're going to look back with a lot of pride with the things that we did, the changes that we made to get back and re-engage with these new consumers. And I think a lot of it's going to be because of the new leadership, fresh ideas. I'll put yourself in that category, even though let's say you're like, the a 30-year-old person, but you come with a fresh perspective and you're not burdened, which we talked about, you're not burdened by, well, this is the way I was taught. And so we're going to do the way that, this is what I was taught. So we're going to keep doing it this way. You're not burdened by that. And we need more leadership along those lines who are free to go, well, why can't we just do more half bottles? Or why can't we change our package? Or why does the bottle have to weigh 15 pounds? Like, why can't we go to lightweight bottles? I mean, all of the above.
All of it matters. We have to, ask those questions. We have to ask ourselves, look at the business with fresh eyes. I say that a lot,
Yeah.
and because we're going to fall into the same traps, oh, when we launch a brand, why does it have to be in 5 core varietals? Well,
Right.
because the buyer wants it that. Well, why does the buyer want? Well, or we're going to do wine dinners. Who does wine dinners anymore for, store brand? Like, come on, like, let's figure out what really matters. And I mean, just using that example, George, I would tell you that like all of those knee-jerk things like, oh, we're gonna have a brand, it needs to have all these varietals. Like, no, it doesn't.
Right.
Actually, by creating more items, you dilute what you stand for as a product, and if you had a stronger position, like this is the definitive Pinot Noir from the North Coast, this is the definitive buttery Chardonnay from California, whatever it is, and you don't have that in a Merlot too,
Right.
like that already. Then the consumer is kind of going like, well, which one do you want me to try? Or
Right.
which one is the better one to try? And that immediately dilutes our ability to communicate. And then you walk down that, aisle in the
Yeah.
store and it's a mess, it's impossible to navigate as a newer or uneducated buyer.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it's like, where do you begin? I think the other thing that leadership needs to be okay with, and I said this at the conference, we need to be brave and we need to be okay with like making a mistake here and there. Like if we, you know what I'm saying? Just like you're not gonna hit a home run every time, but swing away
Yeah.
because you're gonna learn something, right? And I think, and maybe it's part of like just where we are as an industry right now. It's scary for a lot of people. They don't they feel like they're on the brink. They don't can't afford to make a mistake. But you know what? Like doing nothing, doing something is better than doing nothing, right? And
Yeah,
you
you gotta pick a direction and go and execute like hell and do the best you can and do it with conviction. I also think you gotta place bets, right? You can't come in with a big bag of wine products and to a distributor and make any headway. You have to come in with this is number one, this is number two, this is number three. We want these three, you got to be more focused. And I think because of the rising tide of the category for a long time, folks could just say, oh, we're just going to add SKUs and we're going to add priorities, and everything was fine because the tide was rising. But
yeah.
it's a different approach. You got to go in and be like, no, these are the three things, and these things absolutely have to get done, and you have to be much more about execution than you historically probably were.
So when you're like, in the room with your marketing, your brand teams, um, are you encouraging like, hey, I need some fresh ideas? Like, how do you motivate those guys to embrace change?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you have to demonstrate curiosity. You have to ask why a lot. You have to, use some data. But I think there's a big, you got to be careful in wine because there's a bit of an echo chamber where there's this group think that kind of happens. Like, oh, it's over here, and then everybody thinks it's over there, and then it's over here, and we all kind of move like 4-year-old soccer or something
Yeah.
around these ideas, and um, and so you just got to be kind of um, I don't know, provocateur and a contrarian, but not stubborn or aggressive. It's just more to just kind of keep pushing the thinking
Yeah.
and the why and ask why 5 times in a row to really get to like really why, and by the time you get to the fifth why and you kind of realize, yeah, this is only because this is what we've always done,
Yeah, it
and
always
you
gets
got to
back
get
to
out
that.
of that loop. And like I say, I think there are pockets, there are ways to make money, there are growing areas. It's going to be much more about share shift than it is about growth, new growth.
Yeah.
So you got to be really clear who your competitors are, how you're going to market, how you're differentiating. It's much more of a guerrilla, surgical pathway when you don't have enough oxygen in the room for everybody. We're playing musical chairs and there's 75% of the chairs and 100% of the people walking around the room. And if you're going to land in one of those chairs when the music stops or the music, you got to be very clear about which chair you're going to, how you're doing it, how you're going to beat out, your competitors. It's a different mindset, so that's what you're trying to preach.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, honestly, I think it's about, being bold, being aggressive, and
Being
just getting after
clear,
it, right?
and taking, understanding you're going to take some risk on, but clarity provides a lot of energy, right? Think about all the steps for a wine product to go through to ultimately get taken off a shelf at a Safeway or something. You know, it's got an idea at some point. You got to sell it internally. You got to sell it to a distributor. You got to sell it to a customer,
Yeah.
and it's got to get off the shelf. If you're dilutive in your approach at the center of that process, it only gets more dilutive going through each one of these steps, right, to the ultimate end user. So the more concentrated you are and the more specific you are at the beginning of that process, the better odds you have are of that, game of telephone going all the way through to the consumer actually buying it. And I think we've been really dilutive, and now look what we've gotten ourselves into. That's why we are where we are.
It is tricky. to your point, like you talked about focus a lot, right? Because trying to be all things to all people, it's like that's a formula for disaster. You get dragged out on the road much? Did the guys get you out in the street? Not the
Oh,
street.
heck yeah, absolutely. My favorite place to be, where I get most of my inspiration is, either in a retail store,
Yeah,
looking at the shelf and being kind of a, passive observer of consumption, or, buyers as it happens, or, just talking to bartenders. It's a great way to kind of learn what's going on and really understand real consumer behavior. You got
yeah.
to do that. You got to feed that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. My last corporate role, I worked for Jim Beam when Jim Beam had a wine division, and that role was my first corporate job. I had always worked for kind of more family owned, so it was a very different environment. But they put me into trade marketing, right? So I thought of myself as the kind of the go between the perfect world, which is the marketing department right here in Hillsburg. We had everything perfectly laid out. If you do this, this is exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And the real world, right, where the sales guys were living. And for me, it was like it was great for me because you needed that, right? You needed to like because that is the real world. I don't care, the best laid plans in the marketing, department wing. When you put it on the street,
Yeah,
it
it's
goes
a
down.
plan until you get punched in the face, I think
Yes.
someone said, right? And then you got to deal with it. So you do have to think very practically. I love I love translating, marketing strategy and getting very granular about the tactics. Early on in my career, I came up with this phrase like in-store origami around display building, but like if you're like the marketer that sits in an office and says, "Oh yeah, we created a display and we sent it out everywhere." No, I'm the guy that watches the person that's supposed to build it, see how long it takes them to build it. Do they
Yeah,
build it right? Is there anything I can do in that process to ensure that that display actually gets built? Not just, oh yeah, boss, we did 1,000 displays. I mean,
yeah,
there's every one of those little tactical things matters. And if you've got in-store origami where it's like too many tab A's and a slot B's and too many, things, and it's not easy, it ain't gonna get executed. And
yeah.
so execution is so important.
Well, listen, man, this has been great. This has been such a refreshing conversation. I love your energy. I love the things that you're saying because I feel like you're saying some things that some people may not want to say out loud about, hey, it's broken. We got
Yep.
to make some changes, but it needs to be said. And I think you're going to do great in
Thank
the
you, George.
role. Congratulations. Congratulations to the Franzia family and to everybody over at Bronco. I'm just convinced because I think you got the right attitude. We got to do things different. So I wish you all the luck in the world, man. And I really appreciate you being with me today.
Same to you. Congratulations on your business too. It's a brave to be an entrepreneur like yourself. So congratulations to you for
Well,
that
I
and your
appreciate that.
accomplishments.
And then everybody who watched, I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dom today. If you like it, make sure you like our YouTube channel and stay tuned for our next Win Insider series. And Dom, I know you're an avid golfer. I hope you find some time to get on the course with everything else you're doing.
Watch the U.S. Open. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
All
All
right.
right, man.
Cheers.
Thanks. And I hope to meet you in person one day soon.
That will definitely happen. Hopefully with a wine glass in our hands.
Perfect.
All
Thanks,
right.
Dom.
Take care.